Water, please.
There you go, sir. Yeah, let me fix your tie. You got your mic, Jake? Check, check, check.
Oh, we're on air?
Oh, shoot. All right.
Oh, whoa. Didn't see you guys there. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Lee with CNN Kauhui Nightly News. A question we have been receiving from our student viewers is, why do my parents always talk about Medicare? Or why do my grandparents always talk about Social Security payments? Well, boy, do I got an answer for you. They're talking about social welfare policies. They are the government programs that provide assistance for specific people, like the food stamp for the needy or aid for the disabled or blind. Although social welfare policies are famously known to mainly help the poor, this is a major confusion. Ironically, the government gives more money to the non-poor than the poor. There are two kinds of programs within social welfare policies. The first are entitlement programs, aka social insurance programs. They provide benefits by law and regardless of need. Also, with entitlement programs, they're just like paying into the program and then later receiving money back. The second program is the means-tested program. The means-tested program provides benefits to people with certain needs. Although very popular, means-tested programs actually create political controversy. Like those who see the poor as irresponsible tend to oppose these programs, while those who see poverty as largely beyond people's control tend to support them. So that student viewers is basically what social welfare is. Alright, so now I'll take it to...
Forgot the mic, sir.
Oh, please. Alright, do run air, man.
Hi.
Alright, so now I'll take it to Mr. Nguyen to describe income, poverty, and public policy.
Good morning, class. How's your day today? It's Mr. Nguyen here. Hello, class. Hello, Mr. Robinson. Okay, so today we have some SSL. Sit down, shut up, and listen. So this little story we're going to read today is on taxation and income. Once upon a time, there were these means-tested programs that were not given to anyone freely. To qualify, you must meet specific requirements. For example, the income for a family of 3 must be less than 15 grand. In 2005, the median American household income was 46 grand. A major battleground in income was who gets what. One day, the distribution of income was constant, but the rich was just getting richer and the poor was just getting poorer. The poorest minority group in America would be the Native Americans, Latinos, and African Americans. The average income for Native Americans would be around $31,799, while the Hispanic average would be around $31,703, and the African Americans averaging the least $28,789. Another minority group that is poor are the unmarried women that have children. The theory is called the feminization of poverty. It is shown that not having a man in the house will lead to poorer economic consequences. According to Diana Pierce, who is a researcher on women poverty, said that 2/3 of the poor that were over age 16 were women. However, there is a way to receive money back from the government instead of paying income taxes. The types of taxes that we have to pay to the government are either progressive, proportional, or regressive taxes. Proportional taxes are when the people with high income have to pay more taxes than the poor. Proportional taxes is when everyone has to pay the same amount. Regressive tax is when the burden falls only on the low income group. The way the poor are able to get money from the government is through the Earned Income Tax Credit, also known as the EITC. This group helps workers who have children with an income of less than 31K. The group spends about $20 billion a year helping poor families in need. However, the rich also have a way of not paying as much money on taxes. The way that they do it is by capital gains. Capital gains are investment in bonds, and they're used to encourage entrepreneurship and are taxed at a lower rate than regular income. Capital gains help with tax reductions because the rich are taxed 15%, which is below the 35% maximum tax rate on ordinary income. It is also used to avoid double taxation. Capital gains have saved the wealthy $38.7 billion. How great is that? Well, that concludes today's story. Thank you, kids, for coming out today. Bye, Mr. Robinson. Bye, class.
Wow, Thank you, Mr. Nguyen, on that wonderful report. Now I'll send it to Senator Borna on his blog clip on Social Security.
Hey guys, my name is Borna Magul, and today I'm going to be talking about Social Security. So in America, citizens who are employed must pay tax to something called Social Security. Now, because we have so many Americans paying into Social Security, it is actually one of the most expensive public policies in the United States history. Social Security is an entitlement program where money from employed citizens is basically just redistributed amongst the retired, the disabled, and the poor, the retired of which being the majority of Social Security beneficiaries. Now, Social Security was created by FDR's Committee on Economic Security, which had the goal of getting the unemployed into the workforce and bringing the elderly out of the workforce, which was basically the goal of the Social Security Act of 1935. It was initially called Old Age Survivor Disability Insurance, or OASDI, and its figures are actually still recorded by Social Security today. So how exactly does Social Security works is actually a really complicated process. So try to pay. If you have a job, you have to set a certain percentage of your salary into Social Security so that when you become retired or disabled, you can apparently get that money back. So once you've decided on a percentage, your employer must also match that amount, and then you and your employer's contributions are both sent to Social Security. Keep in mind, Social Security is actually considered a tax, so you can't exactly evade paying it by not choosing a percentage on your salary that you want to pay into Social Security, even if you don't plan on using those checks in the future. So once the employer and the employee have both put in contributions into Social Security, those contributions are then put into a Social Security trust fund. It is at that point they are recorded. Social Security is required by law to invest those trust funds into U.S. Treasury bonds, where they are then called special issue securities. So yeah. Social Security is involved special issue securities, which are supposedly secure by Social Security. But how secure really are these special issue securities? The answer is no, they're not actually secure, and I'll tell you why later. Once the United States Treasury actually gets a hold, they can then be put out on the open market so they can be invested into businesses and stuff. The United States Treasury then charges interest on these investments, and then they collect all the profits and then out to eligible Social Security recipients. In fact, of the 2 points the United States Treasury had in 2011 due to Social Security contributions, $60 billion by 2012 is due to interest. The fact that these securities are available on the open market shows that they're not really secure because your money is on the open market without your consent. Now granted, these securities have actually made money for Social Security over the last 70 years, but there's always the possibility that they won't. Take a look at this graph, which shows Social Security's income.
Wow, thank you, Senator Borna, on that wonderful report on Social Security. Now I'll send to one of our viewers, McGangsta, on his music video on social policy elsewhere.
Versus its outcome. Recently the lines have been coming really close together, and if they do intersect, that means that the Treasury will make no money, and thus eligible Social Security recipients will get less. The income rate that Social Security receives due to security interest is declining, and is expected to continue declining. But the open market isn't the only factor that affects Social Security's success. There's also the worker to elderly ratio. Currently the worker to elderly ratio is 3.4. which means there's about 3.4 workers for every retiree. But as you can see in this graph, the amount of elderly is only increasing, so the contributor to elderly ratio is actually decreasing. This is because of the baby boom during the 1950s, which has led to the rapid increase in the number of elderly today. So there are two solutions to this problem. Number one, the minimum percentage that each worker must pay into Social Security is actually raised to meet the worker to elderly ratio, but nobody likes new taxes. Number two, the amount of money given to each Social Security recipient is actually reduced, so the amount of money that Social Security has to distribute will actually last longer. The problem with this is that Gallup polls have recently shown that over 50% of eligible Social Security recipients, mainly elderly people, have actually admitted that they are actually dependent on these Social Security checks. So just deducting from them would leave the AARP in an uproar. Number three is advocated by George W. Bush. Workers take a small amount of what they put in their trust fund and then they privatize it, meaning that they put it into a bank, a bond, or even in an investment. Now this option does seem like the best of the other two, but we do have to realize that Social Security actually depends on contributions. So if workers start to take away their own contributions, then Social Security will only die faster. But you probably haven't been paying attention to what I've been saying, and you're probably not asking yourself, wait, is Social Security constitutional? I mean, there had to have been some states with unemployment and retirement compensation programs before 1935, so wouldn't Social Security just violate the 10th Amendment and infringe on the states' rights? Well, there have been 2 court cases regarding this. Now, the first one was the Stewart Machine Company versus Davis in 1937, which basically challenged the federal government if it had the right to force states to establish unemployment compensation funds as part of Social Security. The Supreme Court ruled in the federal government's favor because they saw Social Security as a tax, and the federal government has a right to enforce that tax. Now, the second one was Hovering versus Davis in 1937, which basically challenged the federal government if it had the right to enforce Social Security at all. Now, the Supreme Court ruled once again in the federal government's favor, due to how since trust funds weren't being earmarked or being used on specific projects and were part of welfare policies, they were technically constitutional. But if you guys remember about what I said earlier, the Treasury markets off special issue securities all the time, so has this court case been overruled over time? You see, Social Security is actually a really complex problem because we don't know how to appease both the contributors and the recipients at the same time. But why should this concern you? Because if you don't work already, in the future when you do get a job, you're going to have to deal with your own Social Security contributions. And it's the federal government's job to decide whether you have to pay more for Social Security now when you have a job, or later in the future when you do retire, you get less money in Social Security checks. But if you look at this graph, you can see how Social Security's cost rates are actually higher than its income rates. So change needs to come to Social Security, and soon. Thank you for watching.
Yo, listen up. Austria, Belgium, France, Spain, and Italy started with Bismarck of Germany. Bismarck introduced old age pension insurance, Medicare, formed from the basis of European welfare. School would win support of the working class and reduce the outflow of immigrants in the U.S. mass. Average wage a year was 60 grand. Asking for a raise was a sick demand. Now listen up. The liberal countries include Australia, Canada, Japan, Switzerland, and the US. Now let's talk about Great Britain. Great Britain, that's the sick life. Very wealthy, very rich, but the taxes knocked them down. So now, when you get down to rich life, there you go. Great Britain, yeah, is the great UK. Free school meals, that's their way. Poverty was so ugly like sick brown worms. Needed to build good reforms. After the tax they went down a year. Drained from their taxes, pour the tears. Most reforms were non-government organization, became the most important provider for the population. Universal child benefits support a family in doom. After World War II, helped drive the baby boom. Yo, I know what you're thinking. Let me help you here. Oil countries include Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, United Arab Emirates. Now the social democratic are the Nordic countries, which is Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden. Sweden, probably the best country to be in. The economy is unlike US. Lego. Sweden has a rich and successful history, known as peoples here, equal in prosperity, immune to the problems which other nations face. Contemporary world could solve any case. Maintains a standard of living was like the beat of a drum. Elderly and young maintain the levels of income. Sweden is the best, as you already know, was able to keep the employment very low. So now you know the Nordic countries, oil countries, Great Britain, Germany, and the great USA. This is Mick Gangsta. I love you all. You too, Mr. Robinson. I see you over there. I'm out, man. Peace out.
Alright guys, well that concludes our social welfare policies. And I'm Anthony Lee with CNN. Hope you guys have a good night.